Hey, it's Carrie.
And Ashley.
We welcome you to the Self-Care Cafe. We are both health professionals and moms and nature lovers and food lovers and love helping women get over dieting and just start living. We think that talking about bodies and perfect bodies and dieting is just boring.
Did we put you to sleep there, Carrie?
Yes. So if you are ready to ditch dieting and get to living and talk about more important things, then you are in the right place. We don't put shame and guilt on the menu here. You don't even have to tip us.
Nope.
Come hang with us. The advice is free. We want to have a bunch of girlfriends to just hang out with and get real with, and it's time to start living, ladies.
Hey, Carrie.
Ashley, what's going on?
Oh, just another day.
Another day, another dollar.
Right.
What's on the menu for today?
Well, drum roll, please. I was thinking we could talk about nutrition myths.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be the star today.
Well, if my brain works well, sure, but I think you'll have to hop in.
I'll help you out.
Yeah. And, Carrie and I kind of came up with this list a little while ago, and a lot of it came from like conversations we've had with clients or things we see in social media. And it's kind of stuff that we want to clear the air about.
Because it drives us crazy.
That's right.
So
So
the first one, the calories in, calories out myth. What would you like to say about that, my dear?
it's not true. Should be short and sweet. No. So
right.
I think we all operate on this idea that however many calories we're taking in, we feel like we're burning off that many in a day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea of like weight loss, for example, is that we need to take in less calories than we're burning to have like that calorie deficit to be able to lose weight. Would you agree that that's kind of like...
Yeah, it makes it, I think because people like black and white thinking, right? It makes it very cut and dry. If you eat more calories than you're putting out, you're going to gain weight. And if you eat fewer calories, you burn off more calories than you're taking in, you're going to lose weight. And I mean, way back when, I don't know, however many years ago I was in college, this is what they were still teaching. This was originally, they actually did used to think this. That's where it came from, right? It wasn't like just something someone made up.
Right.
It actually, they figure it out because there's a seed of truth to it, right?
Right.
But
right.
There's so much more to it. That's not how our bodies work. We're not just computers where you put one number in and you get another number out.
Exactly. And like what Carrie's saying, we expend different amount of calories every day with our activity, and just our body functions use calories. I'm not sure if people know that. We're going to get into that one a little bit more at some point. I think we have that somewhere on the list too.
Yep.
So the amount that we eat, we don't have to burn off exactly that amount to like break even or be zero or whatever it is.
Yeah, and you couldn't anyway. Right?
Right,
It's impossible to do exactly like eat exactly the number of calories, and there's even calorie counters and whatever, charts and stuff. What's a medium-sized apple?
Right, exactly.
Right? Like it's just there is no way to get it exactly. And there's so many different things that influence your weight. One of them's hormones, and there's genetics, and there's season of life, like I'm in the menopausal season of my life, and I've seen some of the effects. There's just so many different things. It is not as black and white and simple as just calories in, calories out.
Exactly.
Well, Ashley, but if I can do it, you can do it.
Ugh.
Myth number 2.
This is probably my biggest, like, least favorite one. So, like, we're talking about people that have done something to influence their health and or their weight, and then preach to everybody that this is a great way to do it and everyone can do it if you just do what I did. Um, and we're not all the same, like we just mentioned in the previous one. We're not machines. We all have different things going on. So frustrating.
Yeah, it is. And when well, also what falls under this is willpower, right? Like if you
Right.
just have willpower to do it, and so those of us who don't have the willpower are just screwed.
Right. Jesus.
Throw in the towel because forget about it, right?
Hmm.
And where a lot of it, any kind of behavior change really starts in the brain, and it's changing
Right.
um when you're changing habits or anything like that. um some of it is changing your beliefs about yourself,
Right.
and things like that, which is a whole other
Right.
don't go down that rabbit hole, Carrie.
No,
Rein me back in, Ashley.
that's all right. Yeah.
But yeah, just because it worked for one person doesn't mean it's going to work for
Right.
another. It doesn't mean it's healthy for you either.
Exactly. That's true. And another part of it is like, if you just work hard enough, like this other person did, well, first of all, this person might just genetically be in a smaller body if they're, aiming for weight loss. And no matter how hard, quote unquote, someone works that's in a larger body, they might never get that size because all of our bodies are just different. They're different sizes. They're, made up differently. We're not meant to all be exactly the same.
Right. And also, you don't know, like, what kills it just kills me. Like, some of these people, especially the celebrities, are like, oh, all you have to do is blah, 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 whatever, XYZ. When you can look at them and clearly see that, one, they went under the knife.
Right.
They probably have a personal chef and a
And
personal trainer,
trainer. Yeah.
right? Like all the and the money,
Right.
right?
And
So
time.
and the time. So there's so many different, like it drives me crazy. I remember just quickly years ago, I got this when I was doing more writing. I got a press release from a representative, and it was on it's this procedure called ab etching. And what it was it was for people who had a certain amount of body fat, which was lower, like they already, dieted their way or extra, their way down to low body fat, but they could not genetically get a six pack.
Mhm.
So the doctor would go in. It was basically a mini form of liposuction. It would be a
Okay.
small cannula, and they would suck out, basically um, suck out the fat in a way that made it look like you had a six pack.
Oh my God.
Can you imagine? So
No.
for one of the professional publications that I wrote for, I said I wanted to do an article on it. Well, they said, well, let's instead we want you to write a letter to the editor about it, and let's see what feedback we get. It was really interesting because it was both ends. I had some people were like very how dare Ms. Myers, think that it was her business, none of my client, because my part of my argument was, if as an exercise and health professional, we are saying all you have to do is, eat less and work out harder and do this and that, and you'll look like this,
Right.
when in fact you're going under the knife and having it done.
Mhm.
How's that being honest to our clients and our students?
Right.
And some people said straight up, it's none of their students and clients' business.
Oh,
Yeah, I was shocked at some of the responses,
that
but
is
some of
so
them
good.
also said that what I wrote made them realize, like, they were thinking about having plastic surgery done,
Mm.
and it changed their mind on it.
Oh, that's
And then the other
exciting.
Yeah, yeah, but you have to keep that in mind, that what you are seeing in pictures on TV and this and that, and they're telling you just do this and it'll work for you too, probably won't. Like, and probably they've also had other enhancements than
Right.
just what they're telling you to do.
And
So,
with most of it, there's like the fine print, even though there might not be actual fine print anywhere, like just the idea of it. Like
right.
there's something else going on probably. And
And
if not for real, like if they really did this and this worked for them, their body's probably more just genetically predisposed to being able to do that, and not everybody's is.
Right. Yeah. And even some of the commercials for the weight loss programs, look at the fine print.
Yeah,
And some of
it's
them
really
didn't even
interesting.
lose weight using that program.
I know.
Yeah, it's just it's keeping that bigger picture in mind and being realistic about it.
Yeah, and it's so hard because
It
we
is
have
hard.
so much pressure. And again, we're kind of going a little bit off topic, even though it's related, but there's so much pressure, and it's easy to find yourself looking for that quick fix. And it's easy to find yourself wanting to believe that these things are true. And Carrie and I will be the first ones to tell you, look at your past experiences with these things. How have they worked for you before?
Right.
And if you're still looking for them, my guess is that they probably didn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think was it our last episode where we talk about the health habits?
I
Just
can't remember one of the last ones.
that we focused on the health habits instead of right. Like so when look at you know, nutrition and intuitive eating and physical activity and sleep and stress and, like we said, season of life and genetics and your medical issues, because those all have to be taken into accountability. And you don't have to, you can change your health without changing your weight.
Yes.
And that is research based, that is evidence based.
That
That if you start moving more, for instance, and you start managing your stress and sleeping better, those you might not drop a pound, but it can change your blood pressure and your cholesterol, and your blood sugar, lower your disease risk.
right.
So
And I hope that you all get sick of us saying that, because I think it takes a long time of hearing it before we actually believe it
absolutely.
and accept it, right? Like we can believe it, but also not accept it yet. And so I hope that we're continuing to plant the seeds.
And water it a little bit and
That's
fertilize
right.
it.
We'll nourish it a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Ashley, do you have to track things for accountability?
Oh, no, please don't, in fact. And we've talked about this on a couple of our past episodes, but the whole tracking idea is, I think people mean well at first, right? Like, I want to do this goal, so I'm going to figure out what I'm doing now, and then make some adjustments and change some things. And a lot of times tracking is part of that. But what happens is we tend to really hyper focus on like data. So if we're tracking, for example, calories, we tend to get this like pass fail mindset around, well, if I have a calorie goal of X, if I go under that, then yay me, I'm good. I did a great job today. But if I go over this X goal, then I'm bad. And there's lots of things that happen based on either one of those outcomes. And most of the time, people are tracking on a daily basis, which is not very helpful because nutrition's about patterns, not days. And I think we're going to talk about a little bit more about that later on. But it's really frustrating because we just get into, like I said, that like hyper focus mindset about it. And like we mentioned, our bodies aren't machines.
Yeah. And then when we get sick of tracking, we stop tracking and then we stop any of the health habits that we were changing.
Right, because it's usually super extreme, like,
Right.
we're trying to cut down, again, I'll stick with the calorie example, we're trying to cut back X amount of calories every day, which is probably too many to take away, and so there's no way it's sustainable. Or another thing, like, do you wanna be tracking calories forever, like, every day? Because if you're cutting back that much, it's harder to pay attention to if you're not doing it, if you're doing something that extreme. So, are we going to stick with that for a long period of time?
Mm,
And again, if not, then we're losing those health benefits, or
right.
maybe,
And it just gets obsessive, right? Like we've
yes,
discussed, also like obsessing about those things, whether it's calories or whatever else you're tracking, macros, physical activity, all of it. It's actually worse for your mental health to get obsessed about all that stuff than it is to not.
Definitely.
Right? Like it negatively affects your mental health.
For sure. And part of it boils down to that like control. Like if I'm not counting calories, for example, then I have no idea what I'm doing and I'm going to go off the deep end and I don't trust myself to, be reasonable about this. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute.
What about carbs?
So they get a bad rap, right, Carrie?
Yes. Carbs are bad. That's the myth.
That is
The
a huge myth.
myth is
So
carbs are bad.
yeah. So in actuality, carbs or carbohydrates are one of our macronutrients, which is something that we need to sustain life.
Mhm.
Carbs are like our main energy fuel, so they're like our body's gas. There are certain parts of our bodies that only really like to run on fuel from carbohydrates. So that's
Like
something
your brain.
interesting. Yes,
Your
exactly.
brain, kind of an important organ.
Just a little bit.
Your brain only uses glucose, correct?
That is right. And so
Glucose comes from carbs.
exactly. So when we're not giving it those things, which come from fruits, vegetables, whole grains, does any of that ring a bell? Like,
Right. And that people are saying that carbs are bad when in fact carbs actually encompasses all those things, fruits,
mhm,
vegetables, whole grains.
yep,
So they are not, they don't seem
beans,
bad
even
to
beans
me.
have
Mhm,
carbs. Like,
mhm.
I think it's tricky when we start, um, like hyper focusing on food groups and removing food groups and things like that because another really big part of nutrition is variety because our
Mm.
body needs so many vitamins, minerals, nutrients for it to function properly. Well, where do we think that we're getting all of these from? It's all the different food groups have different nutrient profiles. So, like carbs have B vitamins, for example, or fruits and veggies have a lot of minerals and things like potassium, for example. And meat has protein and the food groups have different things is the bottom line, and they're all important.
Right, right. Awesome. Well, do I have to eat organic foods or fresh? Like, what about like I've heard that canned, you shouldn't eat canned fruits and vegetables or even frozen, maybe a little bit better than canned. Like, I don't know. What is the truth there?
Yeah, so all of those things are super common. I hear them all the time, but that's all false information. So, organic, I'm just going to kind of start with what you started with and work our way down. So, organic only means that the growing used organic practices, which usually means they're free from certain pesticides or things like that. But that doesn't mean that there's no pesticides used. So I think that's another big piece of misinformation. Um, and sometimes our organic fruits and veggies um, don't make sense for people because they're way more expensive. And so, similarly, with the canned or fresh or frozen, sometimes fresh stuff is way more expensive depending on the season,
Yeah.
right? Like if it's December and you really like fresh cherries, you might not even find them here or they're going to be really expensive. And so, I'd rather have people buy the fruits and veggies that they can afford, whether it's canned, fresh, frozen, whatever, as opposed to not eating them because they feel like they can't because they should only eat organic, for example.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I've
they
actually heard people say that, like, well, I can't afford the organic, so why bother?
right.
Right.
And the nutrition profiles are not that much different between all of them. They still have the nutrition, they still have the fiber, they still have the vitamins and minerals. Yes, cooking or like putting it through a heat process for like canning, for example, does change things around a little bit, but you're still getting so many benefits from it. And they're usually a lot easier to deal with as
Mm,
far as like preparing or eating in general.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, this brings us the next myth about clean eating.
Yeah.
First, what is clean eating?
I guess from what I would gather from everything is clean eating is supposed to be like you shouldn't eat any processed foods. There's even another like subcategory of clean eating that's like only eat raw foods.
Mm,
Um, but basically like no sugar, no fried foods, as close to fresh and unprocessed as you can get. And that is so hard for us to do because we live in such a busy lifestyle for most of us these days that it doesn't make sense to spend all of the time figuring out what we can or cannot eat.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
not to mention, it becomes to be that like obsessive, like, oh, I can't have this banana, but I could have this banana because it's organic, or looking at packages and trying to figure out which one is processed less, for example, or does this have 1 gram of sugar in it? And if so, I can't have it, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, or it gets to the point where some people just won't eat. Like, let's say
Right.
you're running behind and you've got this appointment that you have to get to, but you aren't home and you haven't eaten and you're starving. But you refuse to eat a fast food,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you refuse to eat it. So you'd rather go hungry. And then you get to your meeting and your blood sugar's tanking and
Right.
can't think straight, right? Like, I guess you have to decide for yourself which is what you'd rather have.
Right. And it's frustrating because it's like we're putting our health at risk by trying to improve our health by sticking to these like quote unquote food
Right.
rules. Like,
Yeah, that catch 22.
right, we can't perform our best if we're not fed. And
Mhm.
if we're putting parameters around what food we're able to eat, then it limits our options and it's harder for us to feed ourselves.
Mhm.
And we're doing
Absolutely.
it to ourselves, right? It's not like
Right.
anyone's
Right.
making us do this.
Right. I mean, it's one thing if you've got food allergies
Right, of
or,
course.
or like celiac disease or something like that. Obviously, we're not talking about that kind of instance.
Mhm. Hey, listeners. So, Carrie and I got very carried away during this episode on our nutrition myths. And so we decided to split it into 2 parts. So, tune in to our next podcast, which will be episode 19, to hear the rest of our conversation. We have some really good stuff in there. Yeah, so if you have any questions, we'd love to hear them. You can find us on social media, on our podcast platforms, and on Spotify. There's a Q&A section on there, so if you want to ask questions or leave comments and let us know what you're liking or what you want to hear more of, you can find us there, and all the links to everything are down in our show notes. So hopefully we'll have you tune in to episode 19 next time, and we'll see you then. We love you, Latte.